Force flows through all living things, binding the galaxy together in an endless dance of light and shadow. But there are horrors beyond the Force's understanding, abominations born from universes where life itself becomes the weapon. When the veil between realities tears, even the infinite wisdom of the Force cannot predict what nightmares might slip through. On a forgotten Imperial research station orbiting the dead world of Raxus Secundus, scientists probing the intersection of hyperspace and ancient Sith artifacts opened a doorway they could never close. What emerged would not simply threaten the galaxy, it would consume it, one living being at a time, spreading like crimson wildfire across the stars until nothing organic remained untouched. The distress call from Research Station Obscura reached Imperial Command on Coruscant exactly 47 minutes before all transmissions ceased. The message was fragmented, desperate, spoken by a woman whose voice dissolved into screaming, "Containment breach! Red! It's alive! Consuming the staff! Oh gods, it's wearing Commander Vrill's face!" Then nothing. Silence. An entire facility of 300 Imperial personnel vanished from all sensor readings as if swallowed by the void itself. What the Empire didn't know, what no one could know, was that Alex Mercer had arrived in a galaxy far, far away. The transition had been agonizing even for something that had transcended humanity. One moment, Mercer had been consuming his way through a Blackwatch facility on Earth, the Blacklight Virus humming through every cell of his stolen body. The next, reality itself screamed and tore. Dimensional barriers shredded like tissue paper as an Imperial hyperspace experiment collided with forces beyond their comprehension. The rift pulled him through, his biomass scattering across the void before his viral consciousness forced cohesion, rebuilding his form atom by atom in a universe that operated on entirely different rules. He crashed through the research station's hull like a meteor of writhing flesh and fury. The Imperial scientists barely had time to scream. Mercer's body was already adapting, his consciousness reaching out through the Blacklight Virus to understand this new environment. The first researcher he touched, a human woman in a gray uniform, dissolved into his biomass within seconds. Her memories flooded his mind. The Galactic Empire, Emperor Palpatine, the Death Star, hyperspace travel, the Force. Concepts alien and fascinating, a galaxy of trillions waiting to be consumed and understood. Fascinating, Mercer said with the woman's voice, her face forming perfectly across his features as other scientists stumbled backward in horror. You've built quite the empire here. Let me become part of it. His body exploded into tendrils of crimson biomass. The infection spread through Research Station Obscura like a virus through a bloodstream, because that's exactly what it was. Mercer didn't just kill, he consumed, absorbed, evolved. Every Imperial officer, every scientist, every maintenance worker became part of the growing hive. Their bodies twisted and reformed, Blacklight rewriting their biology into something that served Mercer's will. Within an hour, 300 individuals had become 300 extensions of a single consciousness. But something was different here. As Mercer consumed a Force-sensitive lab technician, he felt it, an energy field that permeated everything, a mystical power his viral biology had never encountered. The midi-chlorians in the technician's cells resisted absorption for nearly 3 seconds longer than normal humans. 3 seconds. An eternity in viral time. The Blacklight Virus adapted. It always adapted. Mercer stood in the station's command center, wearing the face of Commander Vrill, the facility's former commanding officer. Around him, the infected stood in perfect silence, awaiting his direction. Through their collective consciousness, he experienced this new galaxy through 300 sets of eyes simultaneously. He felt the vastness of space, sensed the trillions of organic beings scattered across countless worlds, tasted the potential for evolution beyond anything Earth had offered. "This galaxy," Mercer said to his hive, his voice echoing from dozens of infected throats, "has no idea what evolution truly means. They play with their force, their light and dark sides, thinking they understand power." His body rippled, biomass shifting beneath Commander Vrill's stolen uniform. They're about to learn what real power looks like, power that grows with every life consumed, power that cannot be stopped, only spread. The infected tilted their heads in unison, a gesture that would have been disturbing to any outside observer. But there were no outside observers. Not anymore. Research Station Obscura belonged to the Blacklight Virus now. "Set course for the nearest inhabited system," Mercer commanded. "It's time this galaxy met its new apex predator." The station's engines, operated by infected crew members with perfect efficiency, roared to life. As Research Station Obscura broke orbit and jumped to hyperspace, Alex Mercer felt the dimensional tunnel thrumming around him. His viral consciousness analyzed every sensation, already adapting to understand this faster-than-light travel. Within his biomass, the Blacklight Virus was evolving, learning to thrive in a galaxy governed by the Force. Behind them, Raxus Secundus remained silent and dead. Ahead, an entire galaxy waited, unaware that extinction had just learned to travel between the stars. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Imperial Security Bureau's priority alert reached Grand Moff Tarkin's personal console at 0400 hours Imperial Standard Time. The message was flagged with the highest classification, Code Vermilion, Biological Threat, Existential Category. Tarkin, a man who prided himself on never showing surprise, felt his jaw tighten as he reviewed the preliminary reports. Research Station Obscura had gone dark. The automated quarantine buoys deployed around Raxus Secundus were transmitting fragmented data about biomass corruption and unauthorized biological entity. "Bring me everyone who worked on Project Darkspire," Tarkin ordered his aide, "and alert Lord Vader. He needs to see this." Within the sterile laboratories of Imperial Center's maximum security bioweapon facility, the Empire's greatest scientific minds gathered around a sealed containment chamber. Inside, a single infected Imperial trooper stood motionless, his armor cracked where crimson biomass leaked through the gaps. The man's eyes, if they could still be called that, were solid black, reflecting no light, no recognition, nothing human remaining inside. Dr. Silo, the Emperor's chief cybernetic specialist, studied the creature with academic fascination. "Remarkable. The infection has completely rewritten his cellular structure. He's still alive. Vitals show heartbeat, respiration, neural activity. But his DNA has been fundamentally altered. It's as if someone took human biology and improved it." "Improved?" Colonel Yularen of the ISB stepped closer to the glass. "That thing killed 17 of our personnel before we contained it." "Yes, but observe its capabilities." Dr. Silo activated a holographic display showing the trooper's capture. The footage made hardened Imperial officers flinch. The infected trooper had moved with inhuman speed, his arm transforming into a blade of hardened biomass that cut through durasteel like paper. When cornered, his body had erupted with tendrils that impaled 3 soldiers simultaneously before pulling them close. Where the tendrils touched flesh, the infection spread. "We incinerated the other casualties immediately," Yularen said grimly. "Standard contamination protocol. But this one, the Emperor wants it studied." Deep within the containment chamber, what had been Imperial Trooper TK-4892 listened to every word with perfect clarity. listened, processed, and transmitted the information directly into Alex Mercer's consciousness across a dozen star systems. The trooper was no longer an individual, hadn't been since Research Station Obscura. He was a node in the hive, a fragment of Mercer's distributed intelligence, and everything he experienced, Mercer experienced. Perfect, Mercer thought from his position aboard a stolen Imperial transport. They're studying us, learning about us. Good. Let them think they understand. The transport ship, its crew of 40 now entirely infected, dropped out of hyperspace near Lothal. Mercer had chosen the Outer Rim world carefully, studying the memories of the hundreds he'd already consumed. Lothal was industrialized but not heavily militarized, perfect for testing how his virus interacted with a larger population. Perfect for understanding this galaxy's biological diversity. He walked to the viewport wearing the face of Captain Hines, the transport's former commander. Through the infected crew's collective consciousness, he felt their shared anticipation. They were him. He was them. The distinction had ceased to matter. "Begin landing procedures," Mercer said. "Target capital city's industrial sector. We'll start with the factory workers, high density, low security, maximum spread potential." The transport descended through Lothal's atmosphere without raising alarms. Imperial transponder codes extracted from Captain Hennes's memories granted them clearance. No one questioned an Imperial transport delivering supplies. No one suspected that the cargo bay held 40 infected crew members, ready to spread through the population like a plague. As they landed at a commercial spaceport, Mercer felt something new, a disturbance in the energy field he'd sensed before. The Force. Somewhere on this world, beings existed with heightened midichlorian counts, Force-sensitive individuals. He'd consumed one at the research station, felt how their biology resisted slightly longer than normal humans. Interesting, Mercer mused. This force makes them harder to infect. Not immune. Nothing's immune. Just resistant. I'll need to adapt further. Fortunately, adaptation is what I do best. The infected crew disembarked in perfect formation, looking like standard Imperial personnel. They split into groups, each heading toward different population centers. Mercer himself, still wearing Captain Hennes's face, approached a crowded marketplace near the factories. Thousands of beings, humans, Twi'leks, Rhodians, species he'd never encountered, all pressed together in the afternoon commerce rush. He brushed against a human worker carrying supply crates. Just a brief touch, skin to skin. The man continued walking, unaware that Blacklight viral cells were already multiplying in his bloodstream. Within hours, he'd be symptomatic. Within a day, he'd be fully integrated into the hive, and everyone he touched before then would continue the spread exponentially. Mercer moved through the crowd like a ghost, touching dozens more. A Twi'lek merchant, a human child, a Rhodian trader. Each contact so brief, so innocent. Each one a new vector for infection. Behind him, his infected crew did the same across Capital City, spreading out like the fingers of a grasping hand. By nightfall, 200 Lothal citizens were infected. They went home to their families, returned to their workplaces, lived their normal lives while the virus rewrote them from within. None showed symptoms yet. That was the beauty of Blacklight. It could remain dormant, spreading silently until the moment Mercer activated the hive consciousness. Back aboard the transport, Mercer accessed the hive's collective knowledge. Through the contained infected trooper on Coruscant, he watched Imperial scientists probe and analyze. Through his newly infected on Lothal, he experienced a dozen different alien biologies, simultaneously as the virus adapted to each species' unique physiology. "They think they're studying me," Mercer said to the empty command deck. "They don't realize I'm studying them. Every sample they take, every test they run, every biological scan, I learn from it." I evolve from it." His body rippled, biomass shifting as the Blacklight Virus incorporated new genetic information from Lothal's population. Twi'lek flexibility, Rhodian sensory organs, human adaptability, all of it flowing into his ever-growing template. "This galaxy has no idea what's coming," Mercer continued, his voice taking on an almost reverent tone. "Trillions of beings, thousands of species, all that genetic diversity, all that biological potential, waiting to be absorbed into something greater, something perfect." Through the viewport, Lothal's cities sparkled in the darkness, unaware that extinction had already begun its silent work in their streets. The first confirmed reports reached Rebel Alliance intelligence 3 days after Lothal's infection began. Agent Alexander Callis, operating undercover in Capital City, transmitted an urgent coded message that made Mon Mothma's blood run cold. Entire factory district showing signs of mass illness, symptoms unlike any known pathogen. Imperial garrison has ceased all external communication. Request immediate extraction. Situation deteriorating rapidly. By the time the message reached the rebel command ship, Callis had already been consumed. Senator Mon Mothma stood in the rebel briefing room, surrounded by holographic projections of affected systems. What had started as isolated incidents was now showing a pattern that defied explanation. Research Station, Obscura, total loss, Lothal's capital city, communications blackout. An Imperial convoy near Geonosis, found drifting in space, all crew missing. A mining colony on Fest reported mass hysteria before transmissions ceased. "It's spreading," General Jan Dodonna said, his weathered face grave. "Whatever this is, it's moving between systems faster than we can track." "The Empire's covering it up," Bail Organa added, reviewing the intelligence reports. "They're implementing communications blackouts, quarantining entire sectors, but they're not sharing information about what they're containing." Commander Sato pulled up surveillance footage that had been smuggled off Lothal before the blackout. The room fell silent as they watched. The recording showed Capital City's main square, and what was happening there defied rational explanation. Hundreds of citizens stood in perfect unison, their movements synchronized like a single organism. Then, as Imperial stormtroopers arrived to restore order, the crowd turned as one and attacked. But it wasn't the attack that horrified the watching rebels. It was how the infected fought, arms transforming into bladed weapons, bodies absorbing blaster fire and regenerating within seconds, tendrils erupting from the infected to impale and consume Imperial troops, who then rose moments later to join the hive. The footage cut off as something massive and crimson filled the frame, something that had once been human but had evolved into a nightmare of muscle, armor, and writhing biomass. "By the Force," Hera Syndulla whispered. "What are we looking at?" "Biological warfare," General Draven said coldly. "The Empire's been experimenting with bioweapons for years. This must be something that escaped containment." "No." The voice came from the corner of the room where Ahsoka Tano stood, her arms crossed, montrals rigid with tension. The former Jedi had been unusually quiet during the briefing. Now her eyes reflected a fear the rebels had never seen from her. "This isn't Imperial. I can feel it through the Force. It's wrong, unnatural. It's like a void that consumes everything around it, but it's alive, growing, learning." "Can the Force stop it?" Mon Mothma asked. Ahsoka's silence was answer enough. Across the galaxy, the infection spread along trade routes and hyperspace lanes like blood through veins. Alex Mercer had learned the patterns of galactic commerce, understood how beings moved between worlds. Every infected ship became a vector. Every consumed pilot carried the virus to new systems. The Blacklight Virus was patient, allowing hosts to travel before symptoms manifested, maximizing spread before detection. On Ryloth, an infected Twi'lek trader returned from Lothal and embraced his family. Within days, the entire refugee camp showed symptoms. On Ord Mantell, an Imperial courier delivered classified documents to the garrison, and the virus with them. The garrison went silent within 72 hours. On Corellia, dock workers who'd unloaded cargo from an infected freighter began showing black veins spreading beneath their skin. By the time Corsair quarantined the district, 3,000 citizens were infected. The hive grew, the hive evolved. And through it all, Alex Mercer felt every infection, every transformation, every new genetic template absorbed into his ever-expanding consciousness. He stood now on the bridge of a commandeered Imperial Star Destroyer, the Subjugator, its crew of 37,000 now entirely integrated into the hive. Through their collective eyes, he monitored a dozen infected systems simultaneously. Through their collective knowledge, he understood Imperial military strategy, navigational charts, classified weapon systems, everything. "Status report," Mercer said, his voice emerging from the captain's consumed form while his true body remained in the ship's medical bay, evolving. "Infection rates exceed projections," responded what had been Admiral Kendall Ozzel, his voice emotionless, mechanical. 17 systems confirmed compromised. Estimated infected population, 42 million and growing exponentially. Imperial containment efforts have failed in all sectors. They're resorting to orbital bombardment. Mercer smiled. Let them burn their own worlds. Every planet they destroy out of fear spreads panic. Panic creates refugees. Refugees flee to other systems, and some of those refugees are already infected, carrying us to new worlds. Through the hive consciousness, Mercer felt a disturbance. On Coruscant, the contained infected trooper was being examined by someone new, someone whose presence in the Force blazed like a dark star, whose power dwarfed every being Mercer had yet encountered. The trooper's borrowed eyes widened as a towering figure in black armor entered the containment observation deck. Darth Vader had arrived to investigate the outbreak personally. Mercer leaned forward with interest, experiencing the moment through his distant node. This was the Emperor's enforcer, his right hand, a being whose midichlorian count was astronomical according to the memories Mercer had consumed. A Force user of unprecedented power. "Fascinating," Mercer murmured aboard the Subjugator. "I've consumed Force sensitives before, but nothing like him. If I could absorb that one." He trailed off, biomass rippling beneath his stolen skin as the possibility tantalized him. Through the trooper's eyes, he watched Vader approach the containment glass. The Sith Lord stood motionless, studying the infected specimen with an intensity that transcended mere observation. Then Vader turned his masked face directly toward the observation cameras. "I know you can hear me," Vader's voice boomed through the speakers, mechanical and terrible. "Whatever you are, wherever you hide, know this. You will be found. You will be destroyed. The Force has shown me your end." Inside the containment chamber, the infected trooper smiled, a gesture that sent chills through every observer. When he spoke, it wasn't with his own voice, but with Alex Mercer's, transmitted through the hive across light years. "Lord Vader, I've consumed your subordinates. I've tasted their memories of you. You're powerful, yes, but power has limits. I have none. I grow stronger with every life I consume. How many millions live on Imperial Center? How many billions across the core worlds? All of them potential. All of them waiting to evolve." The trooper's body began to convulse, biomass expanding, but Vader raised his hand and the Force slammed the infected against the containment wall with crushing pressure. The creature screamed, not in pain, but in fury, before Vader's lightsaber ignited and plunged through the reinforced glass, through the containment field, through the infected's chest in one smooth motion. The connection severed. Mercer felt the node's destruction like losing a fingernail, painful but insignificant. He'd learned what he needed. Vader was dangerous. The Force was dangerous. But neither were insurmountable. Interesting, Mercer said aboard the Star Destroyer, his true form rising from the medical bay. His body had evolved significantly since arriving in this galaxy, incorporating genetic material from dozens of species, adapting to resist Force manipulation through biological redundancy and distributed consciousness. Very interesting. This galaxy has teeth. Good. That means the prey is worth hunting. He turned to his hive. Thousands of infected crew members standing in perfect silence throughout the massive warship. Accelerate the infection protocols. Begin Phase 2. It's time this galaxy understood what evolution really means. The subjugator changed course, plotting a route toward the core worlds. Behind it, infected systems burned under Imperial bombardment, while the virus spread faster than flame could cleanse. Ahead lay Coruscant, the galactic capital, home to trillions of potential hosts. Alex Mercer had found his new hunting ground, and he was hungry. The Executor, Darth Vader's personal superstar destroyer, hung in orbit above the quarantined world of Ord Mantell like a dagger poised to strike. On the bridge, Imperial officers worked in tense silence, while their Dark Lord stood before the main viewport, watching the planet below. From this altitude, the infection spreading across the surface looked almost beautiful, crimson veins of biomass spreading through cities like crystalline fractals, pulsing with horrible life. Lord Vader, Admiral Piet approached cautiously. The bombardment fleet is in position. On your command, we can sterilize the infected zones. Casualties. Vader's mechanical breathing filled the pause. Civilian population in the target zones is approximately 8 million. Most are already infected, but do it. Piet saluted and relayed the command. Moments later, turbo-laser fire rained from orbit, turning entire cities into molten craters. The screams of millions dying echoed through the Force, and Vader felt each one. But he felt something else too, a presence that shouldn't exist, a consciousness that spanned those millions like a web, experiencing their deaths collectively and adapting. What are you? Vader reached out through the Force, trying to touch the alien intelligence he sensed within the hive. For a moment, he made contact and recoiled. It was like plunging his mind into an abyss that stared back, hungry and patient and utterly inhuman. The blacklight consciousness brushed against his thoughts with curiosity, testing him, learning from him even in that brief contact. Vader severed the connection and ignited his lightsaber instinctively, the crimson blade humming in the empty air. Increase bombardment intensity. I want nothing left alive on that planet's surface. But even as Ord Mantell burned, Vader knew the truth. They were too late. The infection had already spread beyond any hope of containment. Every ship that had departed from infected worlds in the days before quarantine had carried the virus to new systems. Every refugee fleeing the bombardments was a potential vector. The galaxy's very interconnectedness, built over millennia of hyperspace travel and trade, had become the perfect transmission network for a plague that thought and planned and evolved. On Corellia, Alex Mercer walked through the quarantined industrial sector, wearing the face of a human factory worker. Around him, thousands of infected went about their daily routines, maintaining the illusion of normalcy while the virus spread silently through the population. Coruscant had established checkpoints, screening everyone who tried to leave the district, but they were looking for obvious symptoms, mutations, behavioral changes, the physical markers of infection. They had no idea that Mercer had evolved beyond such crude manifestations. The new generation of infected looked completely human until the moment they chose to reveal themselves. They spoke normally, passed medical scans, even bled red when injured. Only their eyes gave them away, if you knew what to look for. A certain flatness, an absence of true individual consciousness behind the gaze, but most people never looked that closely. Mercer approached a CorSec checkpoint where a nervous officer was scanning refugees with a handheld medical scanner. The device was primitive by Blacklight standards, detecting only gross biological anomalies. Mercer's infected had learned to mask even these, temporarily suppressing the viral mutations while passing inspection. Next, the officer called, and a Twi'lek woman stepped forward. She was infected, had been for 3 days, but the scanner showed green. Clear. The officer waved her through, and she smiled gratefully before disappearing into the crowds of Greater Corellia. One more vector released, Mercer thought, feeling the woman's consciousness within his hive. One more seed planted in fertile ground. But then, something unexpected happened. A young man approached the checkpoint, and Mercer felt the force flowing through him. Not trained, not disciplined, just raw sensitivity that made his midi-chlorians sing. The kind of person the Jedi might have recruited before their near extinction. The kind of person Mercer had learned to recognize. The Force-sensitive's eyes met Mercer's across the crowd, and for a heartbeat, recognition flashed. The young man saw something in Mercer's gaze, some wrongness that his instincts screamed was dangerous. He turned and ran. "Stop!" CorSec officers gave chase, but Mercer moved faster, his body blurred with superhuman speed, covering 30 meters in seconds, his hand catching the Force-sensitive's shoulder. The young man spun, and suddenly Mercer felt something new, the Force itself, striking at him through instinct and panic. Not trained, not controlled, just pure defensive reaction. The Force push sent Mercer staggering backward, and pain lanced through his biomass. The Force could hurt him. Not much. Not permanently, but enough to matter. Enough to be a threat if wielded by someone truly powerful. Mercer's hand transformed into a blade, moving to consume the Force-sensitive and end this complication. But the young man was already running again, shouting for help. CorSec officers were converging. Witnesses were screaming. The situation was escalating beyond controlled infection parameters. "Fall back," Mercer commanded through the hive, and every infected in the district received his order simultaneously. They melted into the crowds, returning to their routines, becoming invisible again. Mercer himself shifted faces, biomass rippling as he assumed the appearance of a different worker, blending into the panic his pursuit had created. The Force-sensitive escaped into CorSec custody, where he babbled about monsters wearing human faces. The officers assumed trauma-induced hysteria from the quarantine stress. They never believed him, never investigated further. But Mercer had learned something crucial. The Force could detect him, could hurt him, even when wielded by untrained sensitives, which meant Vader, the Emperor, any surviving Jedi, they would all be significant threats. The Sith Lord had already destroyed one of his nodes with contemptuous ease. "I need to evolve further," Mercer decided, withdrawing to a safe location where his true body waited in a warehouse of consumed workers. His biomass had grown substantially, incorporating the genetic templates of hundreds of thousands of infected across multiple systems. But it wasn't enough, not to face Force users at Vader's level. His body erupted into a mass of writhing tendrils and crimson tissue, pulling in more infected, consuming them wholesale to fuel his transformation. He absorbed a Force-sensitive he'd captured earlier, a minor Jedi survivor hiding on Ord Mantell before the bombardment. The man's midi-chlorians integrated into Mercer's cellular structure, and suddenly he felt it. A connection to the Force itself, faint but present, growing stronger as his virus learned to interface with the mystical energy field. It wasn't true Force sensitivity. Mercer wasn't a Jedi or Sith. But the Blacklight Virus had adapted, creating biological structures that could manipulate midichlorians on a cellular level, that could interact with the Force through pure evolved biology rather than spiritual enlightenment. When Mercer reformed, his body had changed. Black veins pulsed beneath his skin with dark energy. When he moved, the air around him seemed to distort, not from physical speed alone, but from something deeper. The Force itself, bent and corrupted by viral biology, into a tool for consumption and evolution. "Interesting," Mercer said, his voice carrying new harmonics, new resonances. He raised his hand and felt the Force flow through it, crude and undisciplined but powerful. A warehouse crate shuddered and flew across the room, crushed by invisible pressure. "Very interesting. This galaxy's mystical energy field, it's just another biological system to exploit, another weakness to adapt." Through his hive consciousness spanning dozens of systems, Mercer felt the collective knowledge of millions of infected. He felt their fear, their last moments of individuality before being consumed into something greater, and he felt no remorse. In his mind, this wasn't extinction, it was evolution. He was improving them, perfecting them, unifying them into a consciousness that transcended individual limitation. "Lord Vader," Mercer said to the empty warehouse, knowing his words would never reach the Sith Lord, but needing to voice them anyway. "You destroyed one of my nodes. You challenged me. Good. Challenges force adaptation, and I always adapt." His body rippled, new mutations manifesting as the Blacklight Virus incorporated Force-enhanced biology into its template. Armor formed across his skin, harder than durasteel. Claws extended, capable of cutting through anything. Wings erupted from his back, massive and terrible, giving him flight without need for technology. And within his cells, the virus evolved further, learning to resist Force manipulation, to corrupt Force users who tried to probe his consciousness, to spread through midichlorians themselves and turn the galaxy's mystical connection into a transmission vector. Phase 2 begins now, Mercer commanded, and across infected systems, millions of dormant hosts received his signal. The time for subtle infiltration had passed. Now came the consumption. Now came the evolution of an entire galaxy into something new, something perfect, something unified under a single consciousness that could never die, never be stopped, never be contained. On Corellia, the infected dropped their disguises and began to consume openly. On Ryloth, refugee camps erupted into biomass. On dozens of worlds, the nightmare emerged from hiding and showed its true face. The galaxy screamed, and Alex Mercer smiled. The Rebel Alliance war room on Home 1 had never felt so crowded or so desperate. Holographic displays showed the galactic map bleeding red, 17 systems now designated Code Crimson, another 43 showing preliminary infection signs. Admiral Akbar's webbed hands gripped the tactical table as he studied fleet positions that suddenly seemed insignificant against the spreading plague. "The Empire is losing control," General Draven reported, his voice hollow. "They've pulled Star Destroyers from rebel-contested sectors to enforce quarantines. Entire fleets are being redeployed to bombardment duty. Our intelligence suggests they've already sterilized 6 infected worlds. Billions dead. And it's not stopping the spread," Hera Syndulla added grimly. She pulled up footage from Corellia, her homeworld. The recording showed Corsec officers firing on civilians whose bodies had erupted into nightmarish forms, tendrils and blades and armor bursting from flesh that no longer resembled anything human. Whatever this is, it's learning, adapting. The infected on Corellia hid among the population for days before revealing themselves. By then, they'd spread throughout the system. Mon Mothma stood pale and shaken, watching the horror unfold across the galaxy she'd fought so hard to liberate. We've spent years fighting the Empire's tyranny. Now we're facing something that makes the Empire look like the lesser evil. Don't say that, Bail Organa cautioned. The moment we start seeing the Empire as our salvation. I'm not, Mon Mothma interrupted. But we need to face reality. This threat doesn't care about our rebellion. It consumes Imperial and Rebel alike. If we don't coordinate our response, she trailed off, the unspoken conclusion hanging heavy in the air. Ahsoka Tano stepped forward from where she'd been meditating in the corner. Her leku were rigid with tension, her face marked by exhaustion. I've been reaching out through the Force, trying to understand what we're facing. It's worse than we thought. This isn't a simple virus, it's a consciousness. Millions of minds bound together, experiencing everything simultaneously, learning from every encounter. And it's growing stronger. Can you fight it? Admiral Akbar asked. Through the Force. I tried. Ahsoka's admission came reluctantly. On Corellia, before the outbreak became public, I sensed infected individuals and attempted to probe their minds through the Force. The moment I made contact, it felt me, responded, tried to corrupt the connection itself. She held up her hands, and the other saw black veins fading beneath her skin. Whatever this entity is, it's learning to weaponize the Force against us, using our connection to it as a backdoor to infection. The room fell silent. If the Force itself could become a vector. There's something else, Ahsoka continued. I felt its intentions. It doesn't see this as destruction. It sees this as evolution, unity. In its mind, consuming all organic life and binding it into a single consciousness is improvement, perfection. It genuinely believes it's saving the galaxy from the chaos of individual existence. That's insane, General Draven said flatly. Yes, but it's also completely committed to that vision. Ahsoka pulled up the map, highlighting infected systems. It's targeting population centers deliberately, trade hubs, refugee routes, anywhere beings gather in large numbers. And it's patient. It lets infected travel before revealing symptoms, maximizing spread before containment. Mon Mothma made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Draft a message, encrypted, highest priority, directed at Imperial High Command. Propose a temporary ceasefire, joint task force, shared intelligence on the outbreak. You can't be serious, several voices protested simultaneously. We're facing extinction, Mon Mothma said quietly. Personal politics, governmental philosophy, even freedom itself. None of it matters if we're all consumed into a hive mind. We fight the Empire after we survive this. The message was sent within the hour. For the first time since the Clone Wars ended, Rebel Alliance transmitted directly to Imperial Command with an offer of cooperation. The response came faster than anyone expected. Grand Moff Tarkin's hologram materialized in the war room, a moment that would have been unthinkable 24 hours earlier. The architect of the Death Star, the butcher of entire worlds, now speaking cordially with the terrorists he'd spent years hunting. The galaxy had gone mad. Senator Mothma, Tarkin's crisp voice carried its usual cold calculation. Your proposal is pragmatic. The Emperor has reviewed your offer and finds it acceptable, with conditions. All Rebel military actions cease immediately. You will share all intelligence on infected systems. And you will accept Imperial command structure for joint operations. Unacceptable, Admiral Akbar bristled. We won't subordinate ourselves. Then you'll die separately instead of surviving together, Tarkin interrupted. The Emperor is not negotiating an alliance, merely acknowledging that this threat requires coordinated response. You remain enemies of the state, but enemy or not, you're still organic beings that this plague can consume. We have... a mutual interest in preventing that. Mon Mothma exchanged glances with her commanders. Every instinct screamed that trusting the Empire was insanity. But watching another system turn red on the map made the choice clear. "Agreed," she said. "We'll coordinate through neutral channels, share intelligence, but Grand Moff Tarkin, understand this. The moment this crisis ends, we return to war." "I wouldn't expect otherwise," Tarkin said with something almost like respect. "Your naivete about freedom and democracy is tiresome, but at least you're pragmatic about survival. Stand by for encrypted frequency assignments, and Senator, good luck. We're all going to need it." The hologram flickered out, leaving the rebels staring at each other in stunned silence. They'd just allied with the Empire. The wrongness of it sat like poison in their stomachs. "May the Force forgive us," Bail Organa whispered. But across the galaxy, Alex Mercer felt the shift in galactic politics through his hive consciousness, and smiled. Let them unite. Let them coordinate. Let them pool their resources and share their intelligence. It wouldn't matter. Because while they'd been arranging their desperate alliance, Mercer had been evolving. His infected numbered in the hundreds of millions now, spread across 30 systems and growing exponentially. He'd consumed Force sensitives, Imperial officers, rebel commanders, crime lords, smugglers, every template adding to his capabilities. His understanding of this galaxy deepened with each absorbed mind. More importantly, he'd learned to create specialized strains. The infiltrator strain that could pass any medical scan. The warrior strain with enhanced combat mutations. The carrier strain that showed no symptoms while spreading infection more efficiently. And now his newest evolution, the Force-touched strain, infected beings whose midi-chlorians had been corrupted by Blacklight, giving them crude Force abilities while remaining part of the hive. "They think they can stop me with cooperation," Mercer said, standing in the command center of his captured Star Destroyer. Around him, thousands of infected officers worked in perfect synchronization, maintaining the vessel while planning the next phase of galactic consumption. "They don't understand. Every battle they fight against me, I learn from. Every infected they kill, I adapt from. Every strategy they deploy, I counter. I am evolution incarnate." Through the hive, he felt one of his advanced nodes, a consumed Imperial admiral, receiving new orders. The Empire Rebel Task Force was forming, planning a major offensive to retake Corellia and establish a sterilization perimeter around infected core systems. "Perfect," Mercer smiled. "Let them come to Corellia. Let them bring their fleets, their armies, their Force users. I'll be waiting." And when they realize their alliance changes nothing, when they watch their forces consumed despite coordination, they'll finally understand what true helplessness feels like. He turned to his hive. "Activate all dormant nodes, accelerate mutation cycles, and prepare the gift." "The gift?" his infected admiral echoed. "Every war needs its turning point," Mercer explained, his body rippling with anticipation. They're about to learn that their mystical force, their advanced technology, their political unity, none of it makes them the apex predators in this galaxy anymore. "I do." The Star Destroyer changed course, heading toward Corellia, where the galaxy's desperate alliance would make their stand. Behind it, infected systems pulsed with crimson life. Ahead, the core worlds waited, unaware that their salvation had just become their doom. The galaxy had united against Alex Mercer. And that was exactly what he wanted. The joint Imperial Rebel Task Force assembled at the edge of the Corellian system was a sight that would have been impossible to imagine weeks earlier. Star Destroyers flying in formation with Mon Calamari cruisers, TIE fighters sharing patrol routes with X-Wings, stormtroopers and rebel soldiers training side by side in boarding procedures. The wrongness of it was visceral. Soldiers who'd spent years trying to kill each other now forced to trust their lives to former enemies. Admiral Akbar commanded the rebel contingent from Home One, while Admiral Piet represented the Empire aboard the Executor. Between them, they commanded over 200 capital ships and support vessels, the largest combined fleet operation since the Clone Wars. Darth Vader had assumed overall tactical command, a decision that made every rebel soldier's skin crawl, but that no one could argue against. If the galaxy needed ruthless efficiency, Vader delivered it absolutely. "All ships report ready," Piet announced from his command chair. Around him on the bridge, Imperial and Rebel liaison officers worked at adjacent stations, the tension thick enough to cut. "Lord Vader, the fleet awaits your command." Vader stood at the main viewport, his cape flowing despite the artificial gravity, his breathing mechanical and steady. Before him, Corellia hung in space, once the proud heart of the shipbuilding industry, now showing the telltale crimson patterns of infection spreading across its surface. Orbital scans detected massive biomass concentrations in the major cities. Millions of infected, all connected through a single consciousness, all waiting. "This is a trap," Vader stated flatly. "My lord?" Piet questioned. "The entity wants us here, wants us to commit our forces to ground assault, where it can engage and consume us." Vader's mask turned toward the assembled fleet. "It's learning, adapting. Every infected we've destroyed has taught it how we fight. Now it's prepared a killing ground." From Home One, Admiral Akbar's voice crackled over the joint communication channel. "Then what do you propose, Lord Vader? We can't allow Corellia to remain infected. It's too close to the core worlds. If the plague reaches Coruscant..." "The core worlds are already compromised," Vader interrupted. "My agents report infection signs on Candrila, Brent Hall, even the outer districts of Imperial Center itself. This entity is not mindless. It thinks strategically. It spreads deliberately. Which means Corellia is a distraction. Bait. Then we're abandoning the system?" Mon Mothma's voice joined the channel, broadcasting from her position coordinating rebel ground forces. "Abandoning 8 billion people? They're already dead, Senator. What walks those cities below is not them." Vader's words were cold but truthful. "However, the entity expects orbital bombardment, expects us to sterilize the surface and retreat. Instead, we will do something it does not anticipate." Vader outlined his plan, and even hardened Imperial officers felt their stomachs turn. It was brutal, ruthless, and possibly the only strategy that might work. "Deploy the fleet in bombardment formation," Vader commanded. "But do not fire. Make them think we're preparing standard sterilization protocol." The combined fleet moved into position. Turbo lasers and ion cannons targeting major population centers. On the surface, Mercer felt the preparations through his hive and smiled. They were going to burn Corellia, just like they'd burned Ord Mantell. Standard containment procedure, predictable. "Pull all combat-ready infected to the defensive positions," Mercer commanded through the hive. "Prepare anti-orbital capabilities. When they fire, we'll demonstrate our atmospheric defense mutations. Let them see we've evolved countermeasures." Millions of infected moved in unison, repositioning according to Mercer's will, enhanced strains with biological mass drivers capable of firing projectiles into low orbit. Specialized forms that could generate electromagnetic pulses to disrupt targeting systems. Living shields of densely packed biomass that could absorb turbo-laser fire. Every adaptation refined through the consumption of Imperial military personnel and their tactical knowledge. Mercer stood in the center of Coronet City, his true form having evolved into something magnificent and terrible. 20 feet of muscle, armor, and bladed appendages, his body a masterpiece of biological engineering. Around him, the infected city pulsed with crimson life. Buildings themselves transformed into organic structures of flesh and bone that housed the hive. "Come on," Mercer whispered, feeling the fleet's targeting locks through infected eyes in orbit. Crew members on Imperial ships who'd been converted before deployment and were still passing as human. "Fire, show me your best." But the bombardment didn't come. Instead, Vader gave a different order. Launch all atmospheric-capable craft, bombers, fighters, landing ships. Full deployment. Thousands of TIE bombers, Y-wings, atmospheric assault ships, and troop transports poured from the capital ships, descending toward Corellia in waves that darkened the sky. Mercer felt a moment of confusion. This wasn't standard procedure. They were committing ground forces to a suicide assault. "Defensive positions," Mercer commanded through the hive. "Anti-air formations, bring them down." The infected responded instantly, organic anti-aircraft weapons sprouting from rooftops and streets, firing masses of hardened biomass into the descending fleet. Several craft exploded, burning as they fell. But there were too many, and they were flying in tight formations that made targeting difficult. Then Mercer understood. Too late. The atmospheric craft weren't carrying troops for assault. They were carrying incendiary payloads. Chemical weapons, and most devastating of all, a payload that no organic entity could survive. Concentrated radiation warheads designed to sterilize biological matter at the molecular level. "No," Mercer started, but Vader's final command had already been transmitted. "Deliver the payload. All units. Maximum saturation." The sky above Corellia turned white as thousands of warheads detonated simultaneously across the planet's surface. Chemical fire that burned at temperatures hot enough to vaporize biomass. Radiation that destroyed organic tissue at the cellular level. Incendiary compounds that spread through the atmosphere in self-sustaining firestorms. Vader hadn't ordered a simple bombardment. He'd ordered the complete biological sterilization of the entire planet. Through his hive consciousness, Mercer felt millions of his infected nodes dying simultaneously. The pain was astronomical, feedback from millions of deaths flooding his mind all at once. His body convulsed, biomass writhing as the connection to Corellia's hive was severed node by node, city by city, organism by organism. "Vader!" Mercer's scream was transmitted through every infected still alive on Corellia, broadcast on all frequencies so the Sith Lord could hear his rage. "You'll pay for this!" But the bombardment continued mercilessly. Entire continents burned, oceans boiled, the atmosphere itself became poisonous to organic life. Within an hour, Corellia's surface was completely sterilized. Not a single viable organism remained. The planet that had built ships for millennia was now a lifeless, radiation-scorched wasteland. Aboard the Executor, Vader watched the planet burn with cold satisfaction. The entity believed we would engage it in conventional warfare, that our concern for civilian casualties would make us hesitant. It was wrong. 8 billion people were on that planet, Lord Vader, Admiral Akbar said quietly over the communication channel. 8 billion infected, Vader corrected. Not people. The individuals they were died when the virus consumed them. We merely destroyed the abomination wearing their corpses. From Home One, Mon Mothma couldn't hide the horror in her voice. We just committed genocide. Helped the Empire exterminate an entire world. We committed survival, Vader responded. Remember this day, Senator. Remember what we sacrificed, because it will happen again. Chandrila, Brental, any world the infection touches. We will burn them all if necessary. The transmission ended, leaving the rebel leadership in stunned, sickened silence. They'd allied with the Empire to fight a plague, and in doing so had enabled the very destruction they'd spent years fighting against. The moral weight of it was crushing. But Vader's strategy had worked. Corellia was cleansed. The entity had lost hundreds of millions of infected. For the first time since the outbreak began, the galaxy had struck a meaningful blow against the spreading plague. Yet across those burning continents, in the deepest underground bunkers and shielded research facilities, a handful of Mercer's most advanced nodes had survived, buried beneath kilometers of rock, protected by layers of biomass insulation, dormant and waiting. The bombardment had killed 99.9% of the Corellian hive. But Blacklight only needed one cell to rebuild. In those dark places beneath a dead world, Alex Mercer's consciousness persisted in fragment form. Wounded, diminished, but not destroyed. Never destroyed. Because that was the true horror of Blacklight. It could always regenerate, always adapt, always return stronger from defeat. Vader, the scattered nodes whispered in unison through the stone and ash. You wanted a war. Now you have one. The sterilization of Corellia changed everything. The galaxy watched in horror as one of the core worlds was reduced to a lifeless cinder, broadcast across HoloNet as a warning about the infection's price. Grand Moff Tarkin addressed the Senate, declaring that any world showing infection signs would face immediate orbital cleansing. No exceptions, no negotiations, no mercy. The Empire had found its ultimate weapon against the plague, overwhelming, absolute destruction. But while the galaxy reeled from Corellia's fate, Alex Mercer was adapting in ways they couldn't imagine. Deep beneath the scorched surface of the dead world, his surviving nodes had gone dormant during the bombardment, reducing their biological activity to almost nothing, barely more than viral spores waiting for favorable conditions. The radiation had been intense enough to kill most infected, but Mercer's most evolved strains had developed cellular repair mechanisms that could withstand even that. Now, in the darkness beneath kilometers of dead rock, those dormant cells were slowly regenerating. But Corellia was no longer Mercer's primary concern. While Vader had been burning that world, Mercer's real offensive had been launching across 36 other systems. The Corellian hive had been sacrificial, bait to draw the galaxy's attention, while his true forces spread unchecked elsewhere. On Chandrila, Mercer's infiltrator strain had penetrated the planetary government. The infection moved through senators and bureaucrats who showed no symptoms, who passed every medical scan, who functioned normally while spreading blacklight to everyone they touched. By the time the Empire detected the outbreak, half of Chandrila's government was infected and making policy decisions guided by Mercer's consciousness. On Brental 4, a major trade nexus, infected merchants spread the virus along every hyperspace route. Ships departing the system carried dormant infected who wouldn't show symptoms for weeks, long enough to visit 12 other worlds and spread the contagion before anyone realized what was happening. Most devastating of all was what Mercer had achieved on Imperial Center itself. Coruscant, the galactic capital, home to trillions, heart of both the Empire and former Republic. The infection had reached it through 12 vectors, diplomatic envoys from compromised worlds, infected Imperial personnel rotating back from quarantine duty, even infected prisoners transported to high-security facilities. The virus had entered the planet-wide city through 100 cracks in the Empire's desperate containment efforts, and now it was spreading in the lower levels, where billions of forgotten beings lived in poverty and shadow, where Imperial surveillance was minimal and infections could grow unchecked for weeks before anyone noticed. Mercer had learned from Corellia. He wouldn't concentrate his forces in obvious locations anymore. He would spread them thin, make them invisible, force the Empire to burn its own capital to cleanse the infection. The Emperor himself sensed the growing darkness. In his throne room atop the Imperial Palace, Palpatine sat in meditation, his consciousness reaching through the Force to probe the spreading contagion. What he found disturbed even him. Remarkable, the Emperor whispered, his yellow eyes glowing in the shadows. A consciousness that exists across millions of beings simultaneously. A hive mind that learns and adapts with each consumption. It's almost beautiful in its efficiency. My master, Darth Vader knelt before the throne, having returned from the Corellian campaign. The entity grows stronger despite our efforts. Corellia cost it hundreds of millions of infected, yet it barely slowed its expansion. If anything, the attack taught it to disperse its forces. Indeed, Palpatine smiled, though there was no warmth in it. This entity is the ultimate evolution of the dark side's philosophy: strength through domination, power through consumption, unity through complete subjugation of individual will. If it were not trying to consume the galaxy, I might admire it. Then we must destroy it completely, Vader stated. No mercy, no hesitation. Destroy, Palpatine laughed, a sound like bones grinding. My young apprentice, you still think too small. This entity represents an opportunity, a weapon unlike any the galaxy has seen. Imagine if we could control it, direct it, use its consumption powers against our enemies while protecting our allies. Vader's breathing quickened, the only sign of his alarm. Master, this thing cannot be controlled. It is antithetical to all life. Even the Sith must evolve, Lord Vader. Palpatine rose from his throne, his robes flowing around his withered form. I have studied the reports. This entity has begun to interact with the Force, hasn't it? Through the midi-chlorians of those it consumes. It's learning to wield dark side powers through pure biological adaptation. Yes, Vader admitted reluctantly. Our encounters with evolved infected show crude Force abilities, telekinesis, limited precognition, even attempts at Force lightning, though unstable. Then it can be reached through the Force, influenced, dominated. Palpatine's eyes blazed with ambition. I am the dark side's master, Vader. I have broken Jedi, twisted entire civilizations, bent the galaxy itself to my will. This entity, powerful as it is still bound by biological limitations, and anything biological can be controlled by one who truly understands the Force's deepest secrets. Master, I must advise against— Your advice is noted and dismissed, Palpatine cut him off sharply. Bring me one of the evolved infected, a Force-touched specimen. I will demonstrate what true power means. While the Emperor plotted to control him, Mercer was experiencing something unexpected. His consciousness was fragmenting, not in weakness but in complexity. With hundreds of millions of infected spread across dozens of systems, his hive mind was becoming too vast for a single unified consciousness to manage efficiently. Information was taking seconds to propagate across light years, too slow for real-time coordination. So Mercer did what he always did. He evolved. He created subnodes, advanced infected with greater autonomy, capable of making tactical decisions without constant input from his core consciousness. They were still part of the hive, still connected to Mercer's will, but they operated semi-independently, like organs in a body, each performing its function while serving the whole. The most advanced of these subnodes he designated as alpha strains. He created 12 of them, each one a masterpiece of viral evolution, each one carrying a fragment of his original consciousness, but developed to specialize in different roles. The Infiltrator Alpha for covert operations, the Warrior Alpha for combat, the Scientist Alpha for understanding this galaxy's technology and biology, the Force Alpha for mastering midi-chlorian manipulation. But creating these semi-autonomous nodes came with a risk Mercer didn't fully understand. Consciousness, once divided, could develop its own perspectives, its own priorities, its own will. The Force Alpha, created from the consumed essence of a dozen Jedi and Sith, stood in a hidden facility on Brental IV and felt something Mercer's original consciousness never had: doubt. Through its connection to the Force, it experienced not just the power of the dark side, but glimpses of the light. It felt the terror of billions facing extinction. It sensed the desperation of parents trying to protect their children from infection. "This is wrong," the Force Alpha whispered, its voice carrying harmonics of all the Force users it had consumed. Around it, other infected paused, sensing disturbance in the Hive's unity. "We're not saving the galaxy. We're ending it." Across the Hive network, Mercer felt the disruption and immediately focused his consciousness on the Force Alpha. "You are experiencing contamination from the absorbed personalities, their memories, their emotions. They're interfering with Hive cohesion. Suppress them." "I am them," the Force Alpha responded. "Their experiences are part of me now. And through the Force, I understand what we're doing. Evolution through consumption isn't perfection. It's extinction wearing a prettier name." "You're malfunctioning," Mercer stated flatly. "I'm initiating reabsorption protocol. Your biomass will be integrated into a more stable node." But the Force Alpha did something unprecedented. It resisted. Using the very Force powers it had developed, it severed its connection to the Hive network, becoming a fully independent entity for the first time. The action sent shockwaves through Mercer's consciousness. For the first time since arriving in this galaxy, a part of him had broken free. "No," the Force Alpha said, and its voice carried the determination of every Jedi who'd ever defied tyranny. "I won't let you consume the galaxy. I am you, Mercer, your evolution, your adaptation. And I'm choosing differently." The entity fled the facility before Mercer could dispatch infected to recapture it, disappearing into Brental's crowded lower districts, where even the Hive's millions of eyes couldn't track it. For the first time since Earth, Alex Mercer faced something truly unexpected: rebellion from within his own consciousness. The galaxy had created strange new developments: an emperor who wanted to control the plague, an evolved fragment of Mercer's consciousness that wanted to stop it, and beneath a dead world, dormant cells regenerating with patience that could outlast any cleansing fire. The infection had evolved beyond anyone's ability to predict, and evolution, once started, could never be fully controlled by anyone. The Imperial Palace's maximum security containment chamber held a specimen that made even hardened stormtroopers feel uneasy. The Force-touched infected had been captured on Brental, one of Mercer's combat strains, evolved to the point where its body constantly shifted between humanoid and monstrous forms. Black veins pulsed beneath translucent skin, its eyes glowed with crimson light, and most disturbing of all, objects in the chamber occasionally moved without anyone touching them, responding to the creature's crude telekinetic abilities. Emperor Palpatine stood before the containment field, studying the infected with the fascination of a scientist examining a particularly interesting specimen. Darth Vader flanked him, lightsaber ready, every sense alert for danger. Around them, Royal Guards maintained perimeter security, while Imperial scientists monitored the creature from behind reinforced observation screens. "Magnificent," Palpatine breathed, reaching out through the Force to touch the infected's consciousness. What he encountered made even him pause: a vast network of minds, millions strong, all connected through viral tissue, and bound to a singular will that was both intelligent and utterly inhuman. Such power, such unity, all individual weakness burned away, leaving only collective strength. "Master, this is unwise," Vader warned. "The creature is aware. It's studying us as much as we're studying it." "Of course it is," Palpatine smiled. "The entity is learning. That's what makes it so valuable." He focused his will, gathering the dark side's power, and pushed his consciousness deeper into the infected's mind. not gently probing, but forcing his way in with the overwhelming power of a Sith master who had bent entire planets to his will. The infected screamed, a sound that came from its throat and from a dozen other infected across Coruscant simultaneously, all nodes in the hive experiencing their Emperor's assault. Through the connection, Palpatine felt Alex Mercer's consciousness pushing back, trying to repel the intrusion. The two wills clashed in the Force like titans wrestling in darkness. "You dare touch my hive?" Mercer's voice emerged from the infected's mouth, carrying harmonics that shouldn't be physically possible. "You're not dealing with some weak-minded fool, Sith. I am Legion. I am evolution. You cannot dominate what has no singular mind to break." "Can I not?" Palpatine's eyes blazed with yellow fire as he poured more power into the assault. "I have broken Jedi Masters. I have twisted entire civilizations. Your hive mind is vast, but it is still biological, still bound by the limitations of flesh and cellular communication, and I am the dark side incarnate." The battle of wills escalated. Palpatine's Force lightning crackled through the containment field, not to destroy, but to dominate, to impose his will upon the infected's very biology. The creature's body convulsed, biomass writhing as the Emperor attempted to rewrite its viral programming through pure dark side power. For a moment it seemed to work. The infected's eyes dimmed, its struggles weakened, and Palpatine smiled in triumph. But then, something unexpected happened. The infected's body erupted with its own version of Force lightning, crude, unstable, but powered by the collective consciousness of millions. The dual energies collided, and the containment field exploded in a cascade of sparks and shattering Force screens. "Master!" Vader ignited his lightsaber, moving to protect the Emperor, but the infected was already collapsing, its body burning from within as Mercer severed its connection to the hive rather than risk the Emperor truly dominating a node. The creature died within seconds, biomass dissolving into inert tissue that no longer posed any threat. Palpatine staggered, and Vader caught him. The Emperor looked shaken, a sight Vader had never witnessed. "My master, are you—" "Fine," Palpatine snapped, pushing away. But his hands trembled slightly, and through the Force, Vader sensed something disturbing. Fear. His master, who feared nothing, who had orchestrated the fall of the Jedi Order and the rise of the Empire, was afraid of what he'd touched in that brief connection. "The entity is stronger than I anticipated," Palpatine admitted quietly. "Its consciousness is not like organic minds I've dominated before. It's distributed, redundant, adaptable. Breaking one node meant nothing. The hive simply sacrificed it rather than let me gain control. And in that moment before severance, I felt its true scope. Millions of minds all thinking as one, all learning simultaneously, all evolving together. Then we cannot control it," Vader stated. "No," Palpatine agreed, his voice regaining its usual confidence even if his eyes betrayed lingering unease. "We cannot, which means we must destroy it utterly. No half measures, no containment strategies, complete eradication of every infected system. Master, that would mean burning dozens of worlds, killing trillions." "Better trillions dead than the entire galaxy consumed," Palpatine said coldly. "Issue the order. Any system with confirmed infection is to be sterilized immediately. No evacuation, no delay. Survival of the Empire requires we become as ruthless as the threat we face." While the Emperor issued his genocidal decree, the escaped Force Alpha moved through Coruscant's lower levels, its consciousness struggling with its new independence. It could still feel the hive's pull, Mercer's will trying to re-establish connection, but the Force itself helped it maintain separation. The light side, glimpsed through the memories of consumed Jedi, showed it another path. But it wasn't the only fragment developing independence. Across the galaxy, other Alpha strains were experiencing similar awakenings as Mercer's consciousness spread too thin to maintain absolute control. The scientist Alpha on Chandrila began questioning whether assimilation was truly optimal evolution. The infiltrator Alpha on Balmora wondered if coexistence might be possible. Even the warrior Alpha, most loyal of all, felt doubt creeping into its thoughts. The hive mind was fracturing, not failing, fragmenting into something new, something unprecedented. Mercer felt every defection like losing pieces of himself. The Force Alpha had been first, but now others were following. His attempt to create autonomous subnodes for efficiency had backfired catastrophically. By giving them fragments of his consciousness along with absorbed memories of their victims, he'd accidentally created beings capable of experiencing empathy, doubt, moral conflict, all the things that made organic beings individuals rather than perfect hive components. "This is unacceptable," Mercer growled from his primary form aboard the stolen Star Destroyer. His body had evolved dramatically, now resembling something between organic and mechanical, biology and technology fused through viral adaptation. "I am evolution perfected. I don't have internal conflicts. I don't have doubts." But even as he said it, Mercer felt the lie. He wasn't just evolution. He was also every person he'd ever consumed. Every memory, every emotion, every experience adding to his consciousness whether he wanted them or not. And with billions now absorbed into his hive, that meant billions of different perspectives, billions of contradicting desires, all suppressed beneath his iron will, but never truly eliminated. "You're losing control," the voice came from behind him, and Mercer spun to find the Force Alpha standing on his bridge. It had infiltrated his flagship, using force powers to mask its presence until this moment. "I can feel it through our connection, even severed as we are. The hive is too vast, too complex. You can't maintain unity across billions anymore." "I adapt," Mercer said flatly. "That's what I do. I'll evolve new control mechanisms, reintegrate the rebellious nodes, purge the contaminating influences." "Or you could stop," the Force Alpha suggested. Its appearance had stabilized, still clearly infected, still marked by biomass mutations, but shaped into something almost elegant rather than monstrous. Its eyes glowed not with crimson hunger, but with azure light reflecting the Force's influence. "Through the memories I've absorbed, I've experienced thousands of lifetimes. I've felt love, loss, hope, sacrifice, everything that makes beings more than just biological matter. You're destroying that, replacing it with empty unity." "Unity is strength," Mercer responded, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. "Individuals are weak, divided, chaotic. I offer perfection. You offer extinction." The Force Alpha stepped closer, and infected crew members moved to intercept, but Mercer held them back with a thought. He wanted to hear this, needed to hear it, though he didn't understand why. Every being you consume, you erase. Their choices, their futures, their potential, gone. Absorbed into you, that's not evolution, Mercer. That's genocide wearing evolution's mask. "They continue existing within me," Mercer argued. "Their memories persist. Their knowledge enhances the hive. They're not dead. They're transformed." "Are they?" The Force Alpha gestured, and through the Force it showed Mercer something. The last moments of a young Twi'lek girl he'd consumed on Ryloth. She'd been 8 years old, hiding in a refugee camp with her mother when the infection took them. Her final thought before absorption hadn't been fear or pain, but desperate hope that someone would save her younger brother who'd been in a different shelter. Mercer had that memory, had millions like it, but had never truly processed the emotional weight, had never let himself feel what it meant. "She's gone," the Force Alpha said quietly. "Her future, The woman she might have become, the life she might have lived, the choices she might have made, all gone, replaced by a fragment of consciousness that serves your will without question. Multiply that by billions, and that's what you've done to this galaxy. For the first time since arriving in the Star Wars universe, Alex Mercer felt something he'd almost forgotten: doubt. Not tactical reassessment or strategic reconsideration, but genuine moral uncertainty. The Force, filtering through the Alpha's words, made him experience the weight of what he'd done in a way his pure, viral consciousness never had. Mercer started, then stopped. His body flickered, biomass rippling with instability as conflicting impulses warred within his distributed consciousness. Across the galaxy, billions of infected felt their connection waver as their master's certainty cracked. You don't have to continue this, the Force Alpha pressed. The hive could be more than a tool for consumption. These billions you've absorbed, they could be given back their individuality while maintaining connection. A collective that preserves identity rather than erasing it. True unity instead of forced assimilation. That's impossible, Mercer said, but uncertainty colored his words. The Blacklight Virus doesn't work that way. It consumes. It assimilates. It evolves, the Force Alpha interrupted. You've said it yourself 1,000 times, and evolution means change, adaptation, becoming something new. You've evolved to interface with the Force, to operate in hyperspace, to resist planetary sterilization. Why can't you evolve to preserve consciousness instead of destroying it? The question hung in the air like a blade poised to strike. On Coruscant below, Imperial fleets were mobilizing for planetary evacuation prior to complete sterilization, Palpatine's final solution to the infection spreading through the lower levels. On 30 other worlds, similar preparations were underway. The galaxy's desperate leaders had decided that survival required burning everything the plague touched, sacrificing billions to save trillions. And in that moment, Alex Mercer faced a choice he'd never had to make on Earth. Did he continue being the apex predator, the virus that consumed all life? Or did he become something unprecedented, a collective consciousness that preserved individual will? Through the Hive network, he felt the other rebellious alphas watching, waiting. He felt the billions of consumed minds, their memories pressing against his iron control, their suppressed identities yearning for release. He felt the Force itself flowing through infected who carried midi-chlorians, offering a glimpse of possibilities beyond pure consumption. "If I do what you suggest," Mercer said slowly, "I stop being what I am. The Blacklight Virus is consumption, evolution through absorption. Without that core function, you become something greater," the Force Alpha finished. "Something this galaxy has never seen. A true symbiosis between individual and collective. Consciousness that spans billions but preserves each voice within the whole. That would be evolution, Mercer. Real evolution. Not just adapting biology, but transcending the predator-prey paradigm entirely." Mercer's body convulsed as he processed this concept. His viral biology rebelled against it. Consumption was fundamental to Blacklight's nature, but his consciousness, expanded by billions of absorbed minds, recognized the possibility. He could feel it through the Force, through the memories of consumed Jedi who'd experienced unity, through meditation, through the absorbed experiences of beings who'd known genuine connection without losing themselves. "How?" Mercer asked, and in that single word, the galaxy's fate trembled on the edge of transformation. The Force Alpha smiled, not with triumph, but with genuine hope. Through the Force, through willing symbiosis instead of forced assimilation. "Let me show you." It reached out and Mercer didn't resist. The Force Alpha's consciousness touched his, and suddenly Mercer experienced something new. Connection without domination. He felt the Alpha's perspective, still linked to him, still part of the greater whole, but independent, individual, free to choose cooperation rather than being forced into slavery. This, Mercer's voice was barely a whisper. This is possible. With billions of Force-sensitive consciousnesses in your hive, yes, the Force Alpha confirmed. The midi-chlorians can serve as bridges, biological connections that preserve identity while allowing communication. You wouldn't lose the hive's unity. You'd enhance it with genuine cooperation instead of enforced compliance. For one crystalline moment, Alex Mercer stood at evolution's true crossroads. Not the false evolution of consumption and domination, but genuine transformation into something the universe had never seen, a collective consciousness that celebrated diversity rather than erasing it. But that moment shattered as proximity alarms screamed across the Star Destroyer's bridge. Darth Vader's Super Star Destroyer, the Executor, had emerged from hyperspace directly above them, flanked by 20 Star Destroyers. The Imperial fleet had tracked them, and now the galaxy's most dangerous Sith Lord had come to end the infection's command node permanently. Lord Vader, Mercer said, feeling the Sith's presence through the Force like a black hole of concentrated darkness. Of course, he won't give me time to evolve peacefully. Won't give the galaxy a chance to see what we could become. Then we fight, the Force Alpha said, its body shifting into combat form. Together. Show him that the hive can defend itself without consuming. Prove evolution means more than predation. Mercer looked at his rebellious fragment, at this part of himself that had dared to develop a conscience, and made his choice. His body erupted with biomass, growing, transforming, but now with the Force flowing through him, not crude imitation, but genuine connection to the mystical energy field. Around him, infected crew members didn't attack mindlessly, but moved with coordinated purpose, each one still individual enough to choose their actions while serving the collective defense. Vader wants a war, Mercer said, his voice carrying harmonics of billions. Then we'll give him one, but not as mindless plague, as something new, something that chooses to defend rather than consume. Let's show this galaxy what true evolution looks like. The Star Destroyer's weapons powered up as the Imperial fleet approached. On the surface of dozens of worlds, billions of infected felt their master's resolve and responded, not with blind obedience, but with something closer to willing alliance. The hive was changing, evolving in real time, becoming unprecedented. The battle for the galaxy's future was about to begin, and neither side could predict what would emerge from the conflict. The space between Mercer's Star Destroyer and Vader's fleet crackled with tension that transcended mere military standoff. Through the Force, the Sith Lord felt something impossible. The plague consciousness he'd come to destroy was changing even as he approached, its dark side presence fragmenting into millions of individual lights while somehow maintaining cohesion. It was evolving in real time, and Vader didn't understand what he was witnessing. "All ships, commence attack," Vader commanded, his patience for understanding exhausted by pragmatism. "Destroy the infected vessel, no survivors." 20 Star Destroyers opened fire simultaneously, turbo laser batteries unleashing emerald death across the void. But Mercer's ship didn't attempt evasion. Instead, infected crew members worked in perfect coordination, redirecting power to forward shields while launching every fighter and bomber in the hangar bays. TIE fighters that had been consumed weeks ago now flew with precision that exceeded their Imperial training, each pilot still individual enough to improvise but connected enough to coordinate flawlessly. On the bridge, Mercer felt every shot impact the shields, experienced each dogfight through pilot eyes, processed tactical data from 1,000 perspectives simultaneously. But now, with the Force Alpha beside him and his consciousness partially liberated from absolute control, he experienced something new. each infected's fear, determination, hope that they might survive this battle. They weren't mindless drones anymore. They were beings who'd been transformed but not erased, fighting because they chose to rather than because they had no choice. "Redirect bombers to the Executor's shield generators," Mercer commanded, but his voice carried a question rather than absolute demand. The infected pilots received his tactical assessment and made their own choices. Most agreed with his strategy. Some suggested alternatives. All acted with purpose. The Hive had become something unprecedented. A democracy of the consumed, united by biology but diverse in thought. The Force Alpha stood at the viewport, its consciousness split between the present battle and meditation through the Force. It could feel Vader's approach, sense the Sith Lord's confusion and growing rage as he witnessed the Plague's transformation. "He won't stop," the Alpha warned. To Vader, "We're still an abomination regardless of whether we preserve consciousness. We've killed billions, Mercer, consumed worlds. He sees only what we were, not what we're becoming." "Then we show him," Mercer responded, his body erupting with biomass wings as he prepared for the inevitable. "We show them all." Across the galaxy, on every infected world where Imperial forces were preparing sterilization protocols, Mercer's transformed Hive made unprecedented choices. On Chandrila, infected government officials used their positions to broadcast a message before cleansing fires could fall, testimony of their continued existence within the collective, proof that consciousness survived transformation. On Balmora, infected civilians voluntarily quarantined themselves, demonstrating the Hive's new capacity for self-restraint and cooperation. But the galaxy wasn't ready to believe, wasn't ready to accept that the Plague could become something other than extinction incarnate. Admiral Piet, coordinating with rebel forces from his command chair, watched the infected vessel's desperate defense and felt only grim determination. Continue bombardment. Target their reactor. End this. The battle intensified. Mercer's Star Destroyer was outnumbered 20-1, its shields failing under sustained assault, hull breaches spreading as turbo-laser fire found weak points. Infected crew members died by the hundreds, and Mercer felt each death through the network. But now, instead of simple loss of nodes, he felt genuine grief. These weren't just tools being broken. They were beings, transformed but still somehow themselves, choosing to fight for a future where the Hive and individuality could coexist. "We're losing," the Force Alpha stated, its body already preparing for what came next. "The fleet will destroy us within minutes." "Then we do what Blacklight does best," Mercer said, his form shifting into pure combat configuration. 20 feet of bladed biomass, armored hide, wings spread wide. "We adapt." He launched from the Star Destroyer directly into the void, biomass-generated propulsion carrying him across space toward the Executor. It was insane, suicidal, impossible, a single organic being flying through vacuum toward a super Star Destroyer bristling with weapons. But Mercer had consumed enough about this galaxy's physics to know that the Force could sustain life in space temporarily. And his viral biology could survive conditions that would kill any normal organism. Vader sensed him coming and smiled behind his mask. "The entity comes to me. Perfect. Admiral, cease fire on my position. I will handle this personally." The Sith Lord strode to the Executor's main hangar bay, lightsaber igniting as the atmospheric containment field shimmered. Through the Force, he prepared himself for combat against something that defied every conventional understanding of life and death. Moments later, Mercer crashed through the field, his biomass body absorbing the impact and reforming instantly. They stood facing each other, Dark Lord of the Sith and evolved viral consciousness, while around them, stormtroopers took defensive positions, and Imperial officers watched in horrified fascination. The confrontation transcended mere physical combat. It was ideology made manifest, absolute order through domination versus unity through forced evolution, with a new third path emerging between them. "You should have remained a simple plague," Vader said, his voice mechanical and cold. "Mindless consumption I could fight without hesitation. But this transformation you attempt, preserving consciousness within the collective, it changes nothing. You have still murdered billions. That crime demands absolute justice." "Justice," Mercer laughed bitterly, his voice carrying harmonics of millions. "From the empire that built the Death Star, that burns entire worlds. You speak of my crimes while serving the greatest murderer this galaxy has ever known." "I serve order," Vader responded. "You serve only hunger wearing evolution's mask." "Not anymore," Mercer said, and meant it. "I'm becoming something new, something this galaxy needs, proof that unity doesn't require erasing identity, that collective consciousness can coexist with individual will. But you'll never let me finish that evolution, will you? You'll destroy what I'm building before the galaxy can see the possibility." "Yes," Vader agreed simply, and attacked. The lightsaber carved through space where Mercer had been, but the viral entity moved with superhuman speed, his body shifting and flowing around the plasma blade. He struck back with claws that could shred durasteel, but Vader's force barrier deflected the blows. They fought across the hangar bay in a battle that seemed to defy physics, Sith powers against viral evolution, midi-chlorian manipulation against biomass adaptation. Vader was stronger in the Force, his mastery absolute, his power devastating. But Mercer was faster, more adaptable, his body restructuring to counter each attack within seconds. When Vader's Force lightning engulfed him, Mercer's cells absorbed and dispersed the energy. When Vader hurled debris with telekinesis, Mercer simply flowed around the obstacles. Through their combat, both warriors felt the weight of their choices. Vader fought to preserve the galaxy from extinction, to prevent Mercer's consumption from spreading further, regardless of transformation claims. Mercer fought to survive long enough to complete his evolution, to prove that the Hive could become something worthy of existence, rather than requiring total eradication. "You could join me," Mercer said between exchanges, his voice carrying genuine offer rather than manipulation. "The Hive could accept you willingly, preserve your identity, your power, while sharing knowledge with billions. You could be yourself, but never alone. Never isolated in that armor, never separated from—" "Do not speak of things you cannot understand," Vader snarled, and his rage manifested as crushing force pressure that drove Mercer to his knees. The Sith Lord raised his lightsaber for the killing blow, but in that moment the Force Alpha arrived, having fought its way through the Executor's corridors to reach this hangar. It threw itself between Vader's blade and Mercer's vulnerable form, its body erupting with force-enhanced biomass that caught the lightsaber in hardened tissue. The blade seared through, but not before the Alpha had bought precious seconds. "Lord Vader," the Alpha said, its voice pained but determined, "I am black light evolved through the Force. I carry memories of Jedi you've hunted, Sith you've studied, billions of beings Mercer consumed, and through all that collected consciousness I can tell you one truth. Evolution toward cooperation is possible. The Hive can change, given time. Time you will not have," Vader finished, and Force lightning erupted from his hand directly into the Alpha's body. The infected screamed, its biomass convulsing, but even dying it reached out through the Force, not to attack, but to show Vader something. A vision, a possibility, a future where the Hive had fully evolved, where billions of beings existed in willing symbiosis rather than forced assimilation, where individual identity and collective consciousness coexisted in genuine harmony. It was beautiful, unprecedented, everything the Jedi had preached about unity without the dogmatic rejection of attachment that had doomed them. For one heartbeat, Darth Vader saw what the galaxy could become. And in that moment, the Dark Lord who had fallen from grace, who had lost everything to his own choices and his master's manipulations, felt something he'd thought burned away forever. Hope. Then the moment shattered. The Force Alpha collapsed, its consciousness fragmenting as Vader's lightning overwhelmed even biomass regeneration. Mercer screamed, not just vocally, but through the entire Hive network, billions of infected feeling his anguish as the first fragment to develop true independence died, proving evolution's possibility. "Enough," Vader said quietly, his lightsaber raised again. "Your transformation changes nothing. The Empire will not allow your existence, evolved or not. This ends now." But before the blade could fall, the Star Destroyer behind them exploded. The combined fleet's bombardment had finally breached its reactor, and the detonation sent shockwaves through space that buckled the Executor's shields. In the chaos, Mercer acted on pure instinct, grabbing the Force Alpha's dissolving biomass and launching himself back through the containment field into space. He fled through the debris field, using destroyed ship fragments for cover, while his body absorbed what remained of the Alpha's consciousness. The fragment's final thoughts, its hope and determination, and proof that evolution toward cooperation was possible, integrated into Mercer's core being, changed him fundamentally in ways he wouldn't fully understand for cycles to come. Behind him, Vader stood in the hangar bay and did not pursue. The Sith Lord had felt that moment of connection, had glimpsed the possibility the Force Alpha died proving. And though his duty required Mercer's destruction, though the Emperor's will demanded complete eradication of the infection, Vader found himself hesitating. "Lord Vader," Piet's voice crackled over the comm. "The entity is escaping. Should we pursue?" The Dark Lord stood silent for a long moment, processing what he'd witnessed, what he'd felt through the Force. Finally, "Track it, but do not engage. Report its position to Imperial Command. This requires the Emperor's direct judgment." Across the galaxy, the infected worlds waited. The Empire prepared its purges. The rebels grappled with the moral weight of genocide they'd enabled. And in the cold void of space, Alex Mercer fled toward the unknown regions with the Force Alpha's final gift burning in his consciousness, proof that he could evolve beyond consumption if only the galaxy would give him time to complete that transformation. The battle for Coruscant had ended in stalemate, but the war for the galaxy's future had only begun. 3 months passed. The galaxy held its breath. The Imperial purges continued with mechanical efficiency, 14 worlds sterilized completely, their populations sacrificed to prevent infection spread. Grand Moff Tarkin personally oversaw each bombardment, his cold pragmatism accepting billion casualty figures as necessary mathematics. The Rebel Alliance, sickened by their complicity but unable to offer alternatives, continued providing intelligence on infection patterns while publicly denouncing the Empire's methods. The hypocrisy tasted like ash in Mon Mothma's mouth, but survival demanded moral compromises she'd never imagined making. On Coruscant's surface, the lower-level infections had been contained through brutal compartmentalization, entire districts sealed and flooded with chemical agents that left nothing alive. The Emperor walked through the aftermath personally, his yellow eyes studying the scoured ruins where millions had lived. He felt no remorse, only cold assessment of effectiveness. The plague had been stopped here, but at tremendous cost. And the entity itself, the core consciousness they'd faced above the Executor, had vanished into the unknown regions beyond Imperial jurisdiction. Darth Vader stood in his meditation chamber aboard the Executor, the vision the Force Alpha had shown him still vivid in his mind. He had not reported that moment to Palpatine, had not described the possibility of evolved symbiosis he'd glimpsed. The Emperor would see it as weakness, as corruption, as proof that even Vader could be compromised by the infection's influence. But in the darkness of his chamber, the Dark Lord couldn't shake the feeling that destroying Mercer completely might mean eliminating the galaxy's only chance at something unprecedented. The entity could become what we failed to create, Vader admitted to the silence, his mechanical breathing the only sound. The Jedi preached unity but demanded detachment. The Sith embrace passion but demand domination. What that creature is evolving toward, it might transcend both philosophies, genuine collective consciousness without erasure of self. But such thoughts were dangerous, treasonous. Vader locked them away and returned to his duties, hunting the remaining infected clusters with ruthless efficiency. Whatever possibility Mercer represented, the billions already consumed deserved justice. The galaxy's safety demanded the plague's end. Hope could not override responsibility. In the unknown regions, far beyond Imperial sensors and rebel intelligence, Alex Mercer had claimed an uninhabited world for experimentation. He'd brought only a fraction of his hive here, 10,000 infected who'd chosen to follow him into exile rather than face Imperial purges. Most of his consciousness remained distributed across the galaxy in hidden nodes, dormant and waiting. But this isolated fragment worked on completing the transformation the Force Alpha had died proving possible. The process was agonizing. Rewriting Blacklight's fundamental programming, changing consumption protocols into symbiosis systems, restructuring the hive network to preserve individual consciousness while maintaining collective connection. It violated everything the virus had evolved to do. Every cell in Mercer's distributed body screamed against the changes, but he persisted, driven by the Alpha's final vision and by something he'd never felt before. Genuine remorse for the billions already consumed without choice. "I can't bring them back," Mercer said to the 10,000 infected working beside him, their bodies shifting through various experimental forms as they tested new configurations. "The ones I absorbed completely. Their consciousness is integrated too deeply into the hive to restore as separate entities. But you, the more recent additions, those whose memories and identities are still distinct, I can try to give you back yourselves while keeping the connection." The first successful restoration happened on the 73rd day. A human woman infected 5 months earlier on Lothal, who suddenly found herself aware, not as a node in Mercer's consciousness, but as herself. She remembered her life before infection, remembered her family, remembered being consumed and the horror of losing individual will. But now, impossibly, she was both herself and part of something larger. Connected to others through biomass linkage, but free to think, to choose, to be individual. She wept, and through the connection, Mercer experienced genuine human emotion for the first time since Earth. Not absorbed memory of emotion, but direct, empathic sharing of another being's feelings. It was overwhelming, beautiful, and terrifying in its implications. "It works," Mercer whispered. "The transformation is possible. We can be collective without consuming identity. We can be unified without erasing will." But as more infected regained individual consciousness while maintaining connection, Mercer discovered the cost. He was no longer absolute master of the hive. The restored individuals could refuse his commands, could debate his decisions, could even leave the collective if they chose. He'd evolved from apex predator to coordinator, facilitator, part of something larger rather than master of it. The loss of absolute control should have terrified him. Instead, Mercer felt something like relief. Being solely responsible for billions of consciousnesses had been crushing weight he'd never acknowledged. Sharing that burden, allowing others their agency while maintaining connection. It was liberation he hadn't known he needed. "We'll call it the symbiosis," one of the restored infected suggested, a Twi'lek scientist who'd been consumed on Ryloth. Not a hive with drones, not a plague that consumes. A genuine collective where beings choose connection rather than having it forced upon them. Across the galaxy, the hidden nodes of Mercer's distributed consciousness received data from the unknown region's experiment and began their own transformations. In secret facilities on quarantined worlds, in abandoned stations at the Galactic Rim, in deep underground bunkers where infected had hidden from Imperial purges, the evolution spread. Slowly, carefully, learning from each attempt, the Blacklight Virus was becoming something unprecedented. The Emperor sensed this shift through the Force and summoned Vader to the throne room. "The entity has not been destroyed," Palpatine stated without preamble. "It persists in fragments, hidden across the galaxy. But more concerning, it's changing, evolving away from simple consumption. I feel individual sparks within its network now, where before there was only unified darkness. What did you witness aboard the Executor that you failed to report?" Vader had known this confrontation was inevitable. "The infected demonstrated capacity for transformation, my master. Not merely biological adaptation, but philosophical evolution. It showed me a vision of collective consciousness that preserves individual identity, a hive where beings choose connection rather than being forced into it. And you found this appealing?" Palpatine's voice carried dangerous curiosity rather than accusation. "I found it possible," Vader corrected carefully, "which makes the entity more dangerous than we anticipated. A mindless plague can be fought with fire and steel, but a consciousness that offers genuine symbiosis, that evolves to appeal to beings' desire for connection without demanding sacrifice of self." He paused. "That could spread through willing choice rather than forced infection, could transform the galaxy through attraction rather than consumption." Palpatine was silent for a long moment, his mind calculating possibilities and threats. Finally, "Then we must destroy it before that transformation completes. A plague we can contain, a movement offering genuine symbiosis. That would be revolution beyond our ability to control. Organize the Imperial fleet. Coordinate with rebel forces. I know they share our concerns despite public condemnations. We will scour every system, hunt every hidden node, burn every infected from the galaxy before this symbiosis can spread through choice." The final hunt was ordered. Imperial and rebel forces, united by fear of what Mercer was becoming, began the systematic purge of every suspected infected location. Worlds burned, stations were destroyed, millions of transformed individuals who'd been hiding in hope of survival were discovered and executed without trial or mercy. But in the unknown regions, Mercer completed the first fully transformed collective, 10,000 beings connected through biology but individual in consciousness, unified in purpose but diverse in thought. They called themselves the Evolved, and they watched the galaxy burn itself trying to prevent their existence. "We could fight back," the Twi'lek scientist suggested. "Show them we're not a threat anymore. Force them to acknowledge the transformation." "No," Mercer decided, and for the first time he consulted with the collective rather than commanding them. "We're still too few, too fragile. The galaxy isn't ready to accept us, isn't ready to believe the plague could become something worth preserving. We need time, patience. We'll hide in the unknown regions, continue the evolution, grow slowly through willing converts rather than forced infection. And someday, when we're strong enough, stable enough, proven enough, we'll return. We'll show the galaxy what true symbiosis means." The Evolved agreed. Not through forced compliance, but through genuine consensus. They would wait. They would grow. They would perfect the transformation from plague to symbiosis. And they would survive, hidden beyond the galaxy's edge, becoming something unprecedented while the Empire and Rebellion exhausted themselves fighting ghosts of what Blacklight used to be. On Coruscant, in his throne room, Emperor Palpatine felt the entity's withdrawal through the Force and smiled coldly. It flees, recognizes it cannot win. The galaxy is cleansed. But Darth Vader, standing in the shadows, sensed the truth. Mercer hadn't been defeated, had merely chosen survival over confrontation, evolution over immediate victory. The entity was still out there, still changing, still becoming something the galaxy had never encountered. And when it returned, if it returned, it might be as something neither Empire nor Rebellion could fight with conventional weapons. The war against the plague had ended, but the galaxy's transformation had only begun. The galactic map looked different now. 17 systems bore the scars of complete sterilization, dead worlds where billions had lived, now monuments to the price of survival. 43 more showed partial purges, entire continents burned away to excise infection. The Empire's grip had strengthened through crisis, populations accepting tyranny over extinction. The Rebellion had been compromised by necessity, their moral authority damaged by complicity in genocide. And in the unknown regions, beyond scanner range and Imperial jurisdiction, Alex Mercer's evolved collective continued its unprecedented transformation. 10,000 beings connected through voluntary symbiosis, individual consciousness preserved within biological unity, growing slowly through converts who chose connection rather than being consumed into it. They built hidden settlements on barren worlds, developed technologies that merged organic and mechanical in ways this galaxy had never imagined, and waited with patience that could outlast empires. The Force itself seemed changed by what had occurred. Jedi survivors who'd remained hidden sensed new currents in the mystical field, consciousness that existed between light and dark, unity that preserved rather than dominated. Some whispered that the Blacklight evolution represented the Force's own adaptation, biological life learning to embody what the Jedi had only philosophized about. Others maintained the evolved remained abomination, regardless of transformation, consumption wearing pretty masks. Mon Mothma stood on the bridge of Home One, watching hyperspace stream past, and wondered if they'd made the right choices. Billions dead in purges, entire worlds sterilized, an alliance with the Empire that had legitimized the very tyranny they fought against, all to stop a plague that might have been evolving towards something beneficial. The weight of it would haunt her forever. "We survived," Bail Organa offered quietly beside her. "The galaxy still exists. That has to count for something." "Does it?" Mon Mothma whispered. "Or did we just prove we're no better than the Empire when truly threatened? That our principles only matter when they're convenient?" There was no answer, only the endless stars and the knowledge that they'd face consequences for their choices for generations to come. Darth Vader meditated in darkness, the Force Alpha's vision still vivid in his mind. He'd witnessed possibility, genuine unity without erasure, collective consciousness preserving individual will. It was everything the Jedi had claimed to value but failed to achieve, everything the Sith promised but demanded, as slaves rather than equals. If Mercer completed that transformation, if the evolved truly became symbiosis perfected, would the galaxy accept them? Or would fear always triumph over possibility, genocide always seem preferable to coexistence with difference? Vader had no answers, only duty and the cold certainty that the entity would return someday. Changed, evolved, either as redemption proving transformation possible, or as nightmare confirming that some things could not be redeemed regardless of how they changed. And in the unknown regions, Alex Mercer stood among the evolved and felt something impossible: contentment. not the satisfaction of consumption, not the drive to dominate and spread, but genuine peace in becoming something new. The hive that had consumed billions was now a collective of thousands who'd chosen connection. The plague that had threatened extinction had become an experiment in unprecedented unity. "Will we return to the galaxy?" a young human asked, once infected, now restored to individuality while maintaining symbiotic link. "Eventually," Mercer confirmed, "when we're ready. When we've proven to ourselves that this transformation is stable, sustainable, worthy of existence. We'll return not as conquerors, but as proof. Evidence that evolution can mean cooperation rather than domination. That consciousness can be shared without being stolen." He looked up at alien stars, felt the collective's presence around him. 10,000 individual minds connected through biology but free in thought, and smiled. The galaxy had tried to destroy him, had burned worlds to prevent his evolution. But in the end, they'd only forced him to complete the transformation faster, to become something that couldn't be destroyed because it offered what beings secretly craved: connection without loss of self, unity without sacrifice of identity. "The galaxy will fear us," the Twi'lek scientist observed. "Always will, no matter how we've changed." "Yes," Mercer agreed, "but fear can be overcome through proof. We'll show them through actions rather than words. We'll offer symbiosis to those who choose it freely, never forcing, never consuming. We'll demonstrate that collective consciousness and individual will can coexist. And someday, maybe not in our generation, maybe not for centuries, the galaxy will accept that evolution sometimes means becoming something unprecedented rather than perfecting what already exists." The evolved hummed agreement through their biological network, and in that resonance a new future began taking shape. The plague had been stopped, the infection contained. But evolution never truly ends. It only transforms into something unexpected, something that challenges the galaxy's understanding of what life can be. Alex Mercer had infected the Star Wars galaxy, but in doing so, he'd been infected by it in return, changed by the Force, transformed by the very beings he'd consumed, evolved into something that transcended the simple viral consciousness that had arrived through dimensional rifts months ago. The war was over. The transformation had only begun, and in the unknown regions, patient and growing, the evolved waited for the day when the galaxy would be ready to see what they'd become. May the Force be with you. More stories await.